It all started with a phone call. One of those unexpected ones that catch you at just the wrong moment, like right when you're slicing an avocado or deep in a video game. I was at home, sprawled out on the couch, half watching some mindless crime documentary, when my phone started vibrating on the coffee table. It was Rachel's name on the screen, which wasn't unusual except for one thing: the time. She was supposed to be at work, wrapping up a big pitch to some client, so why was she calling? I picked up, expecting maybe a cute voicemail or something casual. Instead, I heard her voice, tight and forced, like she was reading from a script. "Hey, Jack, we need to talk," she said. Now, I'm not stupid. The last time Rachel had used those exact words, we ended up in couples therapy for a few months because she'd accused me of emotional laziness or something vague like that. But this time, there was a tremor in her voice, a nervousness she couldn't quite hide. My senses started buzzing, and not in a good way. "All right, talk then," I said, sitting up, suddenly alert. "No, not like this. Not over the phone." I could hear her breathing heavy, could hear the shaky inhale. What the hell was going on? Before I could ask any more questions, she hung up. Just like that. I'm not gonna lie, the next few hours were torture. My mind went to all kinds of places, but nothing could have prepared me for what actually happened later that night. Rachel came home, and she wasn't alone. She walked in with this guy, a total stranger. He was in his late 30s, wearing a suit that looked like it had been plucked straight out of a 90s office catalog. Rachel avoided eye contact with me, while this guy just stood there, looking like he wished he could disappear. "Who's this?" I demanded, feeling my heart pound. The guy opened his mouth as if to speak, but Rachel cut him off, finally looking me in the eye. There was something cold, almost defiant in her gaze. "This is David. He's the man I've been seeing." I felt the ground shift beneath me, like the air had just been sucked out of the room. She said it so flatly, so without emotion. My first instinct was to laugh, like this was some kind of twisted joke. But it wasn't. The guy, David, kept staring at the floor, hands shoved in his pockets, and Rachel just stood there, her face devoid of any regret or sadness. Wait, what?" My voice broke, a mixture of confusion, anger, disbelief. She didn't flinch. "We've been seeing each other for about a year," Rachel continued, and it hit me how practiced her words sounded, like she'd gone over this conversation in her head 100 times. Maybe more. I think I love him." That's when my stomach turned, and everything inside me wanted to explode. Not just at her, but at the situation, at myself. How did I not see it? The late nights at work, the mysterious new friends, the sudden interest in her appearance. It had all been right in front of me, and I had ignored every single sign like an idiot. David finally looked up, and there was something in his eyes that pushed me over the edge. It wasn't shame. It was pity. He pitied me. "Get the hell out of my house," I snarled at him, taking a step forward. David flinched back, and for a second I thought he might actually make a run for it. Rachel stepped between us, her eyes narrowing, like she was preparing for a fight. "Jack, just stop, okay? This isn't about you losing control." She glanced at David. "He's staying. We need to talk." "He's what?" I felt like I was seeing red, the fury bubbling in my chest, ready to spill out. "You bring your affair into my house, and he's staying?" I pointed at David, my hand shaking. "Get out or I swear." Rachel put her hand on my chest. Not in a loving way, but in a firm, blocking gesture, like I was some kind of dangerous animal that needed taming. Her voice was low, calm, too calm. You're not in charge here, Jack. Not anymore. That one statement hit me harder than any punch could have. In that moment, the dynamic shifted. The woman I thought I knew had just shown me a side of herself I hadn't even imagined existed. A side that was cold, calculating, and completely, utterly done with me. David finally took a step back, mumbling something about waiting outside, and disappeared through the door like a ghost. It was just me and Rachel now, standing there in the aftermath of her bombshell. Why? It was all I could manage to say, my voice barely above a whisper. She sighed, running a hand through her hair, not even looking at me. You really want to know? Because it stopped being enough a long time ago. And David, he's what I need now. Her words hung in the air, every syllable twisting the knife deeper. And I just stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. Rachel's words echoed in my head like a drumbeat. Cold, detached, final. Couldn't wrap my mind around it. Everything inside me wanted to scream, to rage, to somehow reverse time and make this nightmare disappear. But all I could do was stand there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, who now looked more like a stranger than ever. How long? My voice cracked as I forced the words out, each one feeling like a dagger twisting in my gut. How long have you been seeing him, Rachel? I needed details. I needed something to cling to, something that could explain the madness unraveling in front of me. Rachel rolled her eyes, rolled them, as if this conversation was beneath her, as if my pain was an inconvenience. I already told you, about a year, she said, her voice dripping with annoyance. Jack, can we not do this drama right now? You asked, I told you. It's done. A year. A whole damn year. That meant the entire time we'd gone on that romantic weekend trip to fix things. She'd already been sneaking around. The whole time I'd been cooking her favorite meals, trying to bring some life back into our evenings. She'd been with him, while I was making plans for our future, for a family. She'd been elsewhere. It was like someone had taken a sledgehammer to the last 11 years of my life, smashing it to pieces. Something snapped inside me. It wasn't just anger. It was fury. I couldn't hold it in anymore. My hands shot out, knocking over the vase on the kitchen counter. It shattered against the tile floor, shards of glass scattering everywhere. Rachel flinched, her face briefly flashing something that almost looked like fear before hardening again into that mask of indifference. Are you done? She said, her voice icy, her eyes boring into me. She stepped over the glass like it meant nothing, like the mess I just made was nothing but another inconvenience she had to endure. No, Rachel, I am not done. I spat the words out. You walk in here with that guy, tell me you think you love him, and you expect me to just what? Accept it? Let him stay here while we talk. I laughed bitterly. What kind of person even does that? What happened to you? She shook her head, almost like she pitied me. You really don't get it, do you? I called you today because I wanted to give you a chance to hear it from me before everything comes out. David's wife found out. That's why I had to bring him here. David's wife. The words tasted like ash. He's married. It just kept getting worse. Every layer I peeled back revealed something even more disgusting underneath. So you're the other woman, too? You're both destroying 2 marriages? For what, Rachel? For some thrill. She crossed her arms, her lips tightening. Stop trying to make me the villain here. You were never around, Jack. Always at work, always in your own head. I needed more than what you were giving me. David understands me in ways you never did. And yes, he's married. Or was soon enough. This isn't just some fling. I took a step back, my heart pounding. the rage inside me mixing with something else. Something colder, heavier. So that's what this is. You're just running away from everything because it got too real, too hard. Rachel laughed, and it wasn't the kind of laugh I'd heard from her before. The warm, genuine one that used to light up our evenings. This one was hollow, almost mocking. Maybe I am. Or maybe I just realized I deserve to be happy. And you know what? I don't regret it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The way she spoke, there was no remorse, no sadness, no sense that she had done anything wrong. And that's when it hit me, Rachel wasn't going to apologize. She wasn't going to beg for forgiveness or try to make this right. In her mind, she was right, and somehow I was the fool who just couldn't see it. Suddenly, the front door opened, and David stepped back inside, his eyes wide as he took in the shattered vase and the tension hanging in the air. He looked between Rachel and me, then said, almost in a whisper, "Is this a bad time?" Rachel turned to him, and in that moment, it was like I wasn't even there. She softened, her eyes warming as she looked at him. A look she hadn't given me in years. "No, it's fine," she said, her voice soothing, comforting. She walked over to him, placing her hand on his arm, like they were already a couple, like they had some shared world that I could never be a part of. Something inside me broke, seeing her touch him like that, in my home, with the shattered remains of our life still scattered around us. This wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. It was her rewriting the story of US, while I was left holding the torn pages. I grabbed my keys off the table, the metal biting into my palm, and turned towards the door. I couldn't stay there, not another second. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice barely holding steady. "And when I come back, I want you both gone. Do you hear me, Rachel? I want you out of my house." She didn't respond. She just kept her eyes on David, as if he was the only person that mattered. And that, more than anything else, was the answer I needed. I slammed the door behind me, the sound echoing in the quiet hallway. I didn't know where I was going, didn't have a plan, but I knew one thing. This was the end of something, of us, of who I thought I was. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something else. Something where I could finally see her for who she truly was. I drove for hours that night, with no destination, just an endless stretch of asphalt under the headlights. The hum of the engine was the only sound cutting through the silence of my thoughts. I had nowhere to go, no plan, no idea how to even begin processing what had happened. Rachel's words, her indifference, David standing there in my house. It all replayed in my mind, over and over, like a loop I couldn't escape. I ended up in a parking lot, somewhere out near the edge of town, by a strip of closed stores and an empty diner. I pulled in, turned off the car, and just sat there, the dark wrapping around me like a cocoon. I had been holding back the storm for hours, and now, alone, I let it hit me. The tears came out of nowhere, unexpected, burning down my face as I slammed my hands against the steering wheel. How could she do this? How could she look at me with those eyes that used to hold warmth and love, and tell me that I was nothing to her now, that everything we had built was nothing but a joke? I screamed, the sound muffled by the closed windows, but it didn't matter. No one was around to hear it anyway. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, the screen lighting up with a notification. I glanced at it, ready to ignore whatever spam message had found its way to me, but I froze. It wasn't spam. It was Stacy, Rachel's best friend, Stacy, the one who had called me just the day before, the one who had sounded so hesitant, like she was on the verge of spilling something important. something she hadn't had the courage to tell me then. "Jack, I need to talk to you. I know about David. Please call me." My heart thudded in my chest, the message blurring as I stared at it. I called her immediately, my hand still trembling as I pressed the buttons, and after a few rings, Stacy picked up. "Jack," she breathed, relief and hesitation mixed in her voice. I didn't think you'd answer." "Stacy, what's going on?" I cut straight to it, my voice still rough. "You called me yesterday. You knew about David. You knew something. Just tell me everything." There was a long pause, and I could almost hear her struggling with herself on the other end of the line. Finally, she spoke, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Rachel's been lying to you, Jack. I didn't want to get involved, but I can't stay quiet anymore. She's not just seeing David. She's been planning to leave you for months. She was waiting for the right moment, for everything to be convenient." I could feel my pulse in my ears, the words hitting me like cold water. "Convenient," I repeated, disbelief cutting through the fog of my exhaustion. "Convenient for what, Stacy?" "For David to leave his wife," she said, her voice cracking. "She wanted to make sure he was serious before she blew up your life. But Jack, it's worse than that." She paused, and I could hear her swallow hard. "That's why my wife, who cheated on me with a married man 7 years ago, called me. That's what David's wife told me. Rachel's done this before." I froze, my hand tightening around the phone until my knuckles went white. "What are you talking about?" I forced the words out, barely able to breathe. 7 years ago, Rachel was having an affair with another married guy. His wife called me, completely destroyed. I thought it was just some crazy story, but now, seeing her with David, the way she's been behaving, it all makes sense. Stacy's voice was trembling, as if she couldn't believe what she was saying. "Jack," she never stopped. She just found a new target. My entire body felt numb, the cold spreading from my chest to my fingertips. 7 years ago, that was when things had first started feeling off between us. I had chalked it up to stress, to work, to whatever excuse we told ourselves when we didn't want to face the truth. I had no idea that, all this time, Rachel had been hiding something so twisted, so ugly. "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Because Rachel is my friend, Jack. I thought she could change. I thought she'd grown up, that she wanted something real with you. But I can't keep lying for her. Not after seeing what she's doing now. You don't deserve this. You deserve the truth." I hung up without another word, the phone slipping from my hand and landing on the seat beside me. 7 years. 7 years of deceit, of playing me like a puppet while she spun her lies. And David, he wasn't the first, not even close. The air inside the car felt too thick, too heavy, and I pushed the door open, stepping out into the cold night. I needed to breathe, needed to feel something other than the crushing weight of betrayal. The stars were out, scattered across the sky, indifferent to my pain. I tilted my head back, staring up at them, wondering how many more secrets Rachel had hidden from me, how much of my life had been a lie. And then, out of nowhere, something shifted inside me. The grief, the anger, the betrayal. It all coalesced into something sharper, something clearer. I wasn't going to let her do this to me anymore. I wasn't going to be the fool, the one left in the dark while she lived her double life. I grabbed my phone again and started scrolling through my contacts, my fingers moving with a purpose I hadn't felt in hours. There was someone I needed to talk to. Not Stacy, not some therapist, not anyone who'd try to make me feel better. I needed the truth from someone who'd seen it all firsthand. David's wife. The call connected after a few rings, and a tired, shaky voice answered. Hello. Hi, this is Jack, Rachel's husband. I think we need to talk. There was a pause, and then a deep sigh, a sound that held more pain than words ever could. Yeah, she said softly. I think we do. The next day, I met David's wife in a small cafe just outside of town. Her name was Linda. I had imagined this meeting 100 different ways on the drive there. How she might react, what she would look like, how I would even begin to have this conversation. But nothing prepared me for the actual sight of her. Linda was sitting by the window, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of her, staring blankly out at the street. She looked worn, like she hadn't slept in days, her face pale and drawn, her eyes rimmed with red. When she noticed me coming in, she gave a weak wave, and I made my way over, feeling that strange mix of dread and determination that had settled in my chest since last night. Jack? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper as I approached the table. Yeah, I said, sitting across from her. I forced a smile, but it didn't feel real. Thanks for agreeing to meet. Linda nodded, her fingers wrapping tightly around her coffee cup. There was an awkward silence, the air heavy between us, filled with the weight of everything we knew, everything we'd lost. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to even begin. What do you say to a stranger whose life has been shattered by the same person who broke yours? Finally, Linda broke the silence. You know, she said, her voice trembling slightly, when I found out about David and Rachel, I thought I was losing my mind. I kept hoping I was wrong, that there was some other explanation. But the truth always comes out, doesn't it? I nodded, swallowing hard, trying to find my own voice. Yeah, it does. I took a deep breath, deciding to just go for it. Stacy told me about Rachel's past, about what happened 7 years ago with the other married guy. I had no idea. Linda looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. Then she gave a bitter laugh, shaking her head. I wish I could say I was surprised, Jack. But honestly, when I found out about Rachel, I knew she wasn't new to this. The way David talked about her, the way she acted, it was like she'd done it all before. She knew exactly how to manipulate him, how to make him think she was his escape. She paused, her eyes dropping to the table, and I could see the pain etched into her features. David thought she was something special. He said she understood him in a way I didn't anymore. I don't know if he ever realized how much he was throwing away for someone who was just playing a game. I clenched my jaw, my anger rising again at the thought of Rachel's cold calculations, at the way she had treated everything we had as if it were nothing more than a pawn in her twisted games. Rachel did the same thing to me, I said, my voice low, barely controlled. She brought David to our house. She told me she thought she loved him right in front of me, like it was nothing. Linda looked up at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She brought him to your house? She sounded horrified, and I nodded, feeling that cold fury rise up in my chest once more. She did, I said. She made me stand there while she paraded him in like he was her new prize. I don't think I'll ever forget that look in her eyes, like I was just something to be tossed aside. Linda closed her eyes for a moment, taking a shaky breath. I'm so sorry, Jack. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared betrayal binding us together in a way that nothing else could. I looked at her, at the rawness of her pain, and realized that I wasn't alone in this. Linda had been used just like me. She had been lied to, cheated on, her life torn apart by the same people who had destroyed mine. "Do you know what you're going to do?" she asked finally, her voice barely a whisper. I shook my head. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to burn it all down. Part of me wants to just walk away and never look back. I think I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all." Linda gave a sad smile, nodding slowly. "Yeah, I know what you mean. I thought about leaving David the moment I found out. But now I'm just numb. I don't know if I have the strength to fight anymore. He's trying to fix things, trying to make promises, but they all sound empty now. The idea of Rachel trying to make amends felt absurd to me. I could only imagine her scoffing at the notion of apology or regret. "Rachel didn't even pretend to be sorry," I said, the bitterness leaking into my voice. "She acted like I was the problem, like I was the reason she needed someone else." Linda nodded, her eyes downcast. "That's how they do it, isn't it? They make it seem like we drove them to it, that it's somehow our fault. But it's not. They chose this." She looked up at me then, her eyes sharp, filled with a clarity that made me realize she wasn't as broken as she seemed. "We didn't do this to them. They did this to us. And we can't let them take any more from us, Jack. We deserve better than this." Her words struck something deep inside me, a flicker of strength I hadn't felt in days. She was right. This wasn't my fault. I wasn't the one who lied, who cheated, who betrayed everything we'd built. That was on Rachel and David. They made their choices, and now they had to live with the consequences. I took a deep breath, nodding. "You're right. We deserve better. We deserve people who actually care about us, who won't lie to our faces." Linda smiled then, a small, sad smile that held a hint of hope. "Yeah, we do. And maybe one day we'll find that." We talked for a little while longer, sharing stories, venting our anger, our sadness. And by the end of it, I felt something I hadn't felt since this all began. A sense of relief. Linda understood in a way no one else could. She had been there, right in the middle of the same chaos, the same betrayal. And somehow, talking to her made me feel a little less alone. As I stood up to leave, I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of something that might have been hope. "Thanks, Linda, for meeting me, for listening." She nodded, her eyes still sad, but there was a strength in them now, a determination that hadn't been there before. "We're in this together, Jack. We'll get through it, one way or another." I left the cafe with a newfound resolve, the cold air biting at my face as I stepped outside. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Rachel might have torn my world apart, but I wasn't going to let her walk away without facing the consequences. And as I walked back to my car, I knew one thing for certain. I was done being a victim. It was time to take control, to decide what happened next, and to finally, truly, let go of the woman who had shown me just how little I meant to her. By the time I got back home that night, a plan was already forming in my head. I wasn't going to let Rachel just walk away with my dignity. She had made her choices, and now it was my turn. She thought she could have her perfect ending without consequences. Parade David in front of me, mock everything we'd built, and leave me shattered in her wake. Well, I had other ideas. As I walked into the house, the weight of what I was about to do hit me. The house was quiet, eerily so, and for a moment, I wondered if Rachel had actually taken me seriously and left. But then I heard it, voices coming from the living room. Her voice, his voice. They were still here, whispering to each other like a pair of teenagers sneaking around. My blood boiled as I approached the living room door, their conversation growing clearer. Rachel was talking to David, her voice hushed, trying to calm him down. It's fine, David. He just needed to blow off some steam. He'll come around eventually. He always does. Always does. Those words were the final match that lit the fire in me. She thought she had me figured out. Thought I would just lay down and accept whatever scraps of her attention she chose to throw my way, no matter how many times she kicked me down. Well, she was wrong. I pushed open the door, and they both turned to look at me. Rachel's eyes widened for a second in surprise, but then she narrowed them, the defiance returning immediately. David, on the other hand, looked like he wished he could disappear, shifting nervously where he stood beside her. "Jack," Rachel said, her voice dripping with annoyance. "You're back already?" I ignored her, my eyes locking onto David. "You need to leave," I said, my voice calm, but with an edge that left no room for argument. "Now." David swallowed, glancing at Rachel for reassurance, but she gave him nothing. Finally, he nodded, muttering something about going outside, and practically ran out of the room, the front door clicking shut behind him. It was just me and Rachel now, standing face to face in the living room that had once been filled with so many good memories. Game nights, lazy Sunday mornings, laughter. Now it felt like a battlefield. "Really, Jack?" Rachel snapped, crossing her arms. "You're going to keep acting like this? You told me you were leaving." I took a step closer, my eyes locked on hers, refusing to back down. "You think you can bring that guy into my house, and I'm just going to walk away? You think I'm going to let you rewrite our history and make me look like the problem? No, Rachel, you're not getting away that easy." She scoffed, her lips curling in disdain. "What are you talking about, Jack? This is over. You and me, we're done. I've moved on. David and I, you and David are pathetic." I cut her off, my voice steady, my anger cold now, controlled. "He's a coward, and you're just repeating the same mistakes over and over. Stacy told me about the affair 7 years ago, about the married guy back then. You've done this before, Rachel. You're not some victim who needed more. You're a liar, and you're destroying lives for what? To feel powerful?" Her face twisted, shock flickering in her eyes for the first time. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I pressed on, not giving her a chance to recover. "You don't get to make me feel like this is my fault," I said, my voice rising. "You don't get to stand there and act like I drove you to this. You did this, Rachel. You chose to lie, to sneak around, to bring that guy into my home. You made this mess, and you don't even have the guts to admit it." She glared at me, her face flushed with anger now. "You think you're so perfect, Jack? You think you were such a great husband? You were distant. You were obsessed with work. You didn't make me feel wanted." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "And instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix it like an adult, you ran off and did the same thing you always do. You found someone else to fill the gap. But guess what, Rachel? You're never going to be happy this way. You'll keep running, keep lying, and you'll never find what you're looking for." She stared at me, her eyes wide, her mouth working as if she wanted to argue but had no words left. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw something else in her eyes, something that looked almost like fear. "You're wrong," she finally said, her voice weak, barely a whisper. "David loves me. He understands me." "No, Rachel," I said, stepping closer, my voice softening but not losing its edge. "David doesn't know you. He knows the version of you that wants to feel exciting, that wants to feel like a savior. But he doesn't know the real you. And I think deep down you know that too." She looked away then, her gaze dropping to the floor, her arms falling to her sides. For the first time, she looked small, almost fragile, like the weight of everything she had done was finally sinking in. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had said what I needed to say, and for the first time since this all began, I felt a sliver of release. This was no longer my burden to carry. It was hers. "I want you out of the house, Rachel," I said, my voice steady. "Take whatever you need, but I want you gone by tomorrow. I'll be talking to a lawyer. We're done." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, regret, maybe even a hint of realization. But it didn't matter. Whatever she felt now, whatever she finally understood, it was too late. The damage was done and there was no going back. Rachel didn't say anything. She just nodded, a barely perceptible motion, and turned away, heading towards the stairs. I watched her go, feeling an emptiness settle in my chest. This was it. The end of us. Not the way I had ever imagined it, but it was the reality I had to face. As I heard her footsteps fade, I turned and walked out of the house, stepping into the cool night air. David was standing by his car, his face pale, his eyes wide as he saw me. He looked like he wanted to say something, but I didn't give him the chance. I walked past him without a word, got into my car, and drove away. This was no longer about Rachel or David. It was about me, about finding a way to rebuild, to move on, to finally let go of the weight I had been carrying for far too long. And as I drove, the night stretching out ahead of me, I knew one thing for certain. I was going to be okay. Rachel had tried to break me, to tear apart everything we had built, but I was still here. I was still standing. And now it was time to start over, to find something real, something true. Something that couldn't be shattered by lies and deceit. I woke up the next morning in a small, no-name motel on the edge of town. The sun was peeking through the thin curtains, and for a brief, glorious moment, I felt nothing. No pain, no anger, just an empty, peaceful clarity. But then it all came rushing back. Rachel, David, the betrayal that had gutted me and left everything I knew in ruins. The room felt cold, the kind of cold that settles into your bones, and I knew I couldn't stay there. It was time to face the next steps, the reality of what needed to be done. I drove back to the house in silence, my thoughts churning with everything that had happened. What would I find when I opened that door? Would Rachel still be there, lingering, waiting for one last fight? Would David be hanging around, desperate to prove something? I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, ready for whatever lay ahead. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Rachel's car was gone. There was a strange emptiness that hit me when I saw the bare space where it had been, an absence that seemed to echo in the quiet morning. The front door was unlocked, and as I stepped inside, the house felt eerily empty. It wasn't just her absence I felt. It was like the spirit of the place had gone, too, as if the memories we'd created here had dissolved into thin air overnight. Rachel had left a few things. Boxes by the door, filled with clothes, some books, and a few other odds and ends she hadn't bothered to pack yet. I didn't even bother to look inside. Letting out a deep breath, I moved into the living room and stopped dead in my tracks. There, on the table, was an envelope with my name scrawled in Rachel's handwriting. A note. I picked it up, feeling a knot form in my stomach. I debated throwing it away unread, but curiosity got the best of me. I tore it open, the paper crinkling loudly in the silence of the empty house. Rachel's handwriting, neat and practiced, stared back at me, and I forced myself to read it. "Jack, I know there is nothing I can say that will make this right. I never wanted to hurt you, but I know that's meaningless now. I think part of me believed I could somehow keep both lives going without anyone getting hurt, but I realized how selfish and stupid that was. I am not going to ask for your forgiveness, because I know I don't deserve it. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for lying to you, for betraying you, for not being brave enough to tell you the truth sooner. I hope one day you can understand why I did what I did, even if you never forgive me. Rachel. I crumpled the note in my hand, the words not quite sinking in. Hope I understand why you did it. The arrogance of it nearly made me laugh. This wasn't about understanding her reasons or seeing her side. This was about the fact that she had destroyed everything we'd built. And for what? A thrill? A chance to feel something different? I tossed the note onto the table, letting it fall on top of the boxes she'd left behind. That was her version of an apology. A couple of vague lines about not wanting to hurt me. A quick justification that did nothing to ease the pain she'd caused. I turned away, refusing to let her have any more space in my head. She was gone, and that was that. With Rachel out of my life, the reality of the next steps hit me all at once. I needed to call a lawyer. I needed to sort through the mess of our shared accounts, our possessions, everything we'd once combined into one life. It was daunting, the idea of untangling ourselves from each other, but it also felt like freedom, like I was finally reclaiming a part of myself that had been buried for too long. I picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number of a divorce lawyer I'd heard good things about. My thumb hovered over the call button for a moment, my stomach twisting. This was it, the official end. Once I made this call, there was no turning back, no chance for reconciliation, no hope of fixing what was broken. But that hope had died the moment Rachel had brought David into our home. I pressed the button and put the phone to my ear, the ringing echoing in the empty room. After a few moments, a crisp, professional voice answered, and I introduced myself, explaining my situation in brief, detached terms. The lawyer listened patiently, asking a few questions, and by the time I hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was the right thing to do. I couldn't keep living in limbo, holding on to the remnants of a life that had already crumbled to dust. I needed to move forward, to start building something new. Something that was mine, without Rachel, without the lies and betrayal that had poisoned everything. The rest of the day was spent packing up her things, shoving her clothes into the boxes without caring if they wrinkled or folded neatly. I moved through the house like a man possessed, driven by the need to get it all out, to purge every trace of her from my life. By the time I was done, the living room was filled with boxes, each one neatly labeled, each one containing the last remnants of what had once been our shared life. I called a moving company, arranged for the boxes to be taken to her new address. She hadn't told me where she was going, but Stacy had. It felt fitting, Rachel leaving without a word, and me tying up the loose ends. Later that night, as the last box was loaded onto the truck, I stood in the doorway, watching it drive away, the taillights disappearing into the dark. The house was finally mine again, empty and quiet, ready for whatever came next. I walked inside, closing the door behind me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. There were no more secrets lurking in the shadows, no more lies waiting to be uncovered. Rachel was gone, and I was still standing, still here, still ready to move forward. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat down on the couch, and stared out the window at the night sky. The silence was comforting, the emptiness no longer a reminder of what I'd lost but of what I could rebuild. My own life, my own choices. I thought about Linda, about the look in her eyes as we talked in that cafe, the determination and sadness mixed together. We'd both been betrayed, both been left in the rubble of someone else's choices. But we'd survived. And now maybe we could both find a way to start over, to build something real, something true. I took a sip of my beer, the cool liquid a sharp contrast to the warmth spreading in my chest. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I'd ever find love again, or if I even wanted to. But I did know one thing: I was free now. Free from the lies, free from the weight of a marriage that had been broken long before I'd realized it. And that freedom, that uncertainty, it didn't scare me anymore. It felt like the beginning of something new, something I could create from scratch. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Not for Rachel, not for what we'd lost, but for myself, for the person I could be, the life I could live. The road ahead was wide open, and I was ready to see where it would lead. A week passed, and in that time, the house began to change. I repainted the walls. I got rid of the old couch that Rachel loved, replacing it with something sleek and modern, something that felt like me. I bought new dishes, changed the bed sheets, tossed out her old throw pillows. It was the beginning of a metamorphosis, a way of marking the end of everything that had been ours. It was therapeutic, and with every change, the place felt a little more like my home and a little less like a reminder of what I'd lost. I had just finished painting the guest bedroom, some shade of blue that felt cool and calm, when there was a knock at the door. I wiped my hands on a rag, frowning. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was late. My first thought was Rachel coming back to cause more drama. But I knew her better than that. She was too proud, too stubborn to come crawling back after the showdown we'd had. I opened the door, and to my surprise, it wasn't Rachel. It was David. He looked awful, his face pale, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, like he hadn't slept in days. He stood there on the doorstep, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, and for a moment he just stared at me, as if he was unsure of why he'd come. I felt a wave of anger rise up, my jaw clenching at the sight of him. This was the man who had stolen Rachel away, who had stood in my living room like he had some right to be there, who had looked at me with pity in his eyes. "Jack," he said finally, his voice low, almost hoarse. "Can we talk?" I wanted to slam the door in his face. I wanted to tell him to get the hell off my property, to never show his face here again. But something in his expression stopped me. There was a brokenness in him, a desperation that I hadn't seen before. He looked like a man whose life had fallen apart, and maybe, in some strange way, I wanted to hear what he had to say. I stepped back, leaving the door open just enough for him to come in if he wanted. He hesitated, then walked inside, his eyes darting around as if expecting Rachel to appear at any moment. I led him into the living room, and we stood there, awkwardly, the air thick with tension. "What do you want, David?" I asked, my voice cold. I wasn't in the mood for pleasantries or apologies. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing, and finally spoke. "Rachel left me," he said, his voice cracking. He looked at me, and there was something raw in his eyes, something that almost made me pity him. "She left 2 days ago, packed up her things and walked out. She didn't even say goodbye." I stared at him, my anger mingling with surprise. She left. It was strange, the idea of Rachel just abandoning him after everything she'd done, after the damage she'd caused to both our lives to be with him. "Why are you here, David? Why are you telling me this?" He ran a hand through his hair, a shaky breath escaping his lips. "Because I don't know what else to do," he said. "She's gone, Jack. She used me just like she used you. I thought she loved me. I thought she wanted a life with me, but she just left. She used me to blow up her life, and when the dust settled, She moved on without a second thought. I couldn't help it. I laughed. A bitter, humorless laugh that echoed in the empty room. And what did you expect me to say to that, David? You think I'm going to feel sorry for you? You think I'm going to help you pick up the pieces? I shook my head, my anger rising again, fueled by the audacity of him standing here, wanting sympathy. You destroyed my marriage, David. You came into my home, stood in front of me, and took what wasn't yours. And now you want me to help you because she's done the same thing to you. He winced at my words, his face crumpling, and for a second, I thought he might actually start crying. I know I don't deserve anything from you, he said, his voice breaking. I know I messed up. I needed you to know. I needed someone to understand. She didn't just hurt you, Jack. She hurt me too. I stared at him, my anger simmering, but beneath it, there was something else. A strange sense of understanding. He was right. Rachel had hurt us both, had used both of us to fill whatever void she was trying to fill. And when she'd had enough, she'd walked away without looking back. I took a deep breath, the tension slowly seeping out of my shoulders. What did you think was going to happen, David? I asked, my voice softer now, though still filled with disdain. Did you think she was going to be different for you? That she was suddenly going to become someone she's not? He shook his head, his eyes downcast. I don't know, he said quietly. I guess I thought we were special, that she really loved me. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face, the exhaustion of the past week catching up to me. Rachel doesn't love anyone, David. Not really. She loves the idea of being loved. She loves the thrill of it, the chase. But once she has what she wants, she loses interest. That's just who she is. He looked up at me, and there was a hopelessness in his eyes that I recognized all too well. What do I do now? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. How do I move on from this? I studied him for a long moment, the man who had once been my enemy, who had taken part in tearing my life apart. And in that moment, I realized that he wasn't my enemy anymore. He was just another victim of Rachel's selfishness, another person left in the rubble of her choices. You pick up the pieces, I said finally, my voice tired. You start over. You learn from it and you don't let it define you. You move on, David. It's the only thing you can do. He nodded, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. I'm sorry, Jack, he said, his voice cracking. I know it doesn't mean much, but I am. I wish I could take it back. I nodded, though I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Maybe one day I could forgive him. Maybe one day the anger would fade, and I'd be able to see him as just another person who had been caught in Rachel's web. But that day wasn't today. You should go, I said, stepping back and opening the door for him. He nodded again, wiping at his eyes, and walked out without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood there for a moment, the silence settling around me once more, and I felt something shift inside. David's visit had been unexpected, and the pain he'd brought with him had reopened wounds I thought I was ready to close. But it had also brought something else, a strange sense of closure. Rachel was gone, and whatever hold she had over David, over me, was gone too. I walked back into the living room, looking around at the changes I'd made, the new beginnings I'd created for myself. And I realized that I didn't need anything from Rachel anymore. Not her apology, not her explanations, not even her regret. I was finally free, and for the first time I truly believed it. Days turned into weeks, and the world seemed to slow down in a way I could finally appreciate. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't waiting for the next bombshell, the next betrayal, the next fight to keep a relationship on life support. I could focus on my own life now, with no strings attached, no ghosts from the past lingering in the corners. I started doing things for myself, simple things that I hadn't done in years. I went out to the park with a book, finding a spot under the shade of an old oak and losing myself in stories that weren't my own. I went to the gym more often, running until I could feel my heart pounding, feeling alive in a way that had nothing to do with anger or pain. I reconnected with old friends, people I had distanced myself from when everything with Rachel became too overwhelming, and they welcomed me back without question, without judgment. It was like breathing fresh air for the first time after being stuck in a smoky room. The house, too, continued to transform. I replaced the pictures of Rachel and me with new artwork. Abstract pieces, bold colors, something that spoke of possibility rather than memories of what had been. I turned the guest room into a little studio space, set up an easel, and began painting again, something I hadn't done since college. It was messy and imperfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. One day, as I was sitting in the living room, sipping a cup of coffee and watching the sun filter through the curtains, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen, expecting a message from one of my friends, maybe a work email. Instead, it was Linda. "Hey Jack, I've been thinking, would you want to grab a coffee sometime? Just to catch up." I stared at the message for a moment, a smile slowly spreading across my face. It had been weeks since I last spoke to Linda, but not a day had gone by that I hadn't thought about her, about our conversation, about the connection we had forged out of shared heartbreak. It wasn't romantic, not in the way you'd see in movies. It was something deeper, something real. We had both walked through the fire, and somehow we had come out the other side stronger, more whole. I typed a quick reply. "I'd love that. How about this weekend?" She responded almost immediately, a simple sounds perfect, smiley face that made me feel a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. It was strange how something so small, so ordinary, could make me feel like I was finally stepping into a new chapter. When Saturday came, I found myself surprisingly nervous. It wasn't a date, I told myself. It was just coffee. Two people who understood each other, who had been through hell and were still standing. But as I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my shirt, making sure I didn't look like I just rolled out of bed, I realized that it mattered more to me than I was willing to admit. We met at a cafe downtown, a cozy place with mismatched furniture and a warmth that felt inviting. Linda was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, her fingers wrapped around a mug, a soft smile on her lips when she saw me walk in. "Jack," she said, her voice light, almost relieved. "I'm glad you came." I sat down across from her, mirroring her smile. "Of course. It's good to see you, Linda." For a while, we talked about the small things, work, hobbies, the books we were reading. It was easy, the conversation flowing naturally, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. Linda had a dry sense of humor that I hadn't noticed before, and her eyes lit up when she spoke about the things she loved. Cooking, hiking, the art classes she'd started taking. Eventually, though, the conversation drifted, as it always seemed to, back to Rachel and David. It wasn't painful the way it used to be. It was more like we were examining something from a distance, something that had happened long ago, something that no longer had power over us. "How are you holding up?" Linda asked, her eyes searching mine, genuine concern in her gaze. I thought about it for a moment, and then I nodded, a smile tugging at my lips. "I'm okay. Actually, I think I'm better than okay. It's strange, but I feel free. For the first time in a long time." She smiled at that, her eyes softening. "Me too. It's like I can finally breathe again. You know? Still hurts, but it's different now. It's like I'm not carrying it around all the time. We fell into a comfortable silence then, sipping our coffee, just enjoying the moment. And as I looked at Linda, I realized that maybe this was what healing looked like. Not some grand revelation, not a sudden burst of happiness, but quiet moments like this, simple, genuine, shared with someone who understood. "Jack," she said suddenly, breaking the silence, her voice hesitant. "Do you ever think about what's next? For you, I mean." I met her gaze, seeing the uncertainty there, and I knew what she was asking. I reached across the table, my fingers brushing against hers. A small gesture, but one that felt like a promise. "I don't know what's next," I said honestly, "but I think I'd like to find out. One step at a time." She smiled, her fingers curling around mine, and in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something real, something solid, something that felt like the beginning of a new story, one that I could write on my own terms. We spent the rest of the afternoon there, talking, laughing, sharing stories, and when we finally left, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I walked her to her car, and as she turned to leave, she paused, looking back at me. "Jack," she said softly, "I'm glad we're in this together." I smiled, a warmth spreading through my chest. "Me too, Linda." She gave me one last smile before getting into her car and driving away, and I stood there for a moment, watching the taillights disappear down the street. The air was cool, the sky darkening, and I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. Rachel had tried to destroy me, had tried to take everything I was and leave me with nothing. But she hadn't succeeded. I was still here, still standing, still ready to move forward. And now I wasn't alone. As I walked back to my car, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. The past was behind me, and the future, whatever it held, was mine to shape. And for the first time, I felt truly free.